Well, thank all of you for coming here. We appreciate it. My name is Mike Kelly. I'm the CEO of ProcessBolt. We have an integrated vendor risk management software solution. The star of our show, to my left here, is Derrick Lowe, the Chief Security Officer of Orlando Health. Derrick, there's a little bit here of a bio, but I figured I might highlight the most important points. Former signal officer, 4 combat deployments, stints at the NSA, U.S. Cybersecurity Command, U.S. Special Operations Cybersecurity Command, recipient of the Bronze Star and Becker's 60 CISOs to Know. So, I'm going to moderate, and he's going to give you all the information that you really need. But we're here to talk basically about 3 things, which is primarily it's going to be best practices in kind of third-party risk in healthcare overall, tactics to actually verify the security of your vendor network, so you don't just have to rely on attestations. And then the third is how you can use AI to enhance the verification in your security posture of your vendor network. So I wanted to start with this slide because ProcessBolt doesn't just sell into healthcare, we sell into every major sector. We received this, my team received this. This is an addendum that this Fortune 50 retailer that happens to be based in Minnesota required us to sign as their vendor, which required us to have 3 things. 1, a vendor risk management program that includes a security assessment. Please note that, more than a security assessment, to do business with this retailer, we also had to remediate the findings from that, and we had to have an ongoing continuous monitoring platform. This is not just the retailer that was doing this, they were requiring that of their own vendors. So we're talking about deep into fourth-party risk. I think it's important to know because that's what we're talking about. Obviously, all of you here know the issues here. 60% of breaches occur through third parties. $11 million for average cost of breach in healthcare. Derrick, you can talk about this. We hear this a lot. There's 3.4 million unfilled cyber jobs. And the problem is, even if you have the budget for staff, you often can't fill it. Was it your experience?
Absolutely. That's a staggering number. And I will even add a little bit more to that. Just say that not only is it unfilled because of its lack of talent. It's not about the organization being able to, find resources or fund the resources, I should say. It's really finding the right people. And that's where the challenges are. There's not a shortage of personnel wanting to enter the cybersecurity field. It's really about the right talent to enter that field.
Which is why it's important to leverage automation, leverage technology, and as we're talking about, leverage artificial intelligence, which we'll get into more. Again, you know how many connected devices are in your hospital facilities, how many connected devices per bed, and you just think about the vulnerabilities for each of those particular potential points of entry. So what we see is companies at various levels of maturity, right? There are some that are still doing nothing. It's almost remarkable that I meet with these companies that still have nothing in place for vendor risk or third-party risk, and it's alarming. Some are using a manual process. They send out a spreadsheet, they get it back. Sometimes it's only when they onboard a new vendor. It's problematic. Some leverage assessment automation software. There's a lot of them out there. It's great. You send out an assessment, you get the assessment back, it's automated, it's stale as soon as it hits your desk. It's not enough. Some are using continuous monitoring. I want to talk a little bit about that. Means risk scoring companies, they're out there. There's some shortcomings with those. We can talk about that as well. If you're looking for a player in that space, make sure that it truly is continuous because many of them buy batch data. By the time it's deployed, that data is stale. You and our practitioners have probably seen that. So, Derrick, I want to talk about this. So some people think because they're leveraging point-in-time risk assessment software product that's enough. Talk about why you think that's not enough.
Yeah, this is a good slide here to talk about because limitation point-in-time assessments is really no good. The data is only good for that moment. A minute later, when you add a new server, new technology in the environment for that third party, that data is stale, vulnerabilities may exist. And unfortunately for us, we only know what we can see at that moment. Now, self-attestation, think about that process. You send that 50 questionnaire, right? Send a spreadsheet with 50 questions. They fill it out. Now, remember, this is a third party that's looking to do business with you. So they fill it out based on their own needs and their requirements. So now there's no trust, there's no validation behind the information that they're sharing, right? Is it incomplete? The other thing is vendor risk it's time consuming, right? Fatigue, that's the word I'm looking for. Vendor risk fatigue, right? Can you imagine Orlando Health, my organization, sending a questionnaire and then the other hundreds and thousands of organizations sending it to that one vendor to do business? So that vendor risk fatigue kicks in, mistakes happen, they don't represent themselves accurately. So things of that nature. Again, that point in time assessment is no good. And so I know I'm not going to jump the gun here, but really having, there's three things: people, process, and technology. We talked a little bit about the people. It's really important to have a good process, but the technology to help augment some of the staff, some of the ways that we do business is very important. And I know we'll get to some of those points.
Now, and we're not saying that point in time risk assessments aren't valuable. They're valuable, they need to be done, but it's not enough just to do them. And there are more tactics we're going to talk about briefly that allow you to actually verify what's in those assessments, so you don't have to rely on an attestation. You can actually verify a significant number of the responses based on other tactics. So we want to talk a little bit about AI. This is one of the ways that you can verify what's in your assessment. So talk about AI and how you're seeing it being potentially positively leveraged in this environment.
Absolutely, that's a game changer. Artificial intelligence technology is a game changer. But the important thing is, remember, I'm a security officer, right? Chief security officer. So I want to make sure we keep left and right limits and boundaries of how we use it. So operating within a sandbox in a confined space is very important. So, but again, lack of personnel, shortage of personnel, leveraging technology to help you enhance your processes. And again, when it becomes too cumbersome, you tend to avoid it. When you avoid it, risk goes up. And the thing is, we want to be risk adverse. We don't want to be, we want to find a balance between operational risk and risk. But technology such as AI is going to take us a long way.
Very important. When I go out and I meet with our customers, they get evidentiary documents back with their assessments, SOC 2s, privacy policies. And I say, well, how many of your staff are actually reviewing those SOC 2s and reviewing those policies? And I get blank stares. We don't have the time to do that. Well, now with the applications of AI, as long as you're using it safely in a closed loop environment, that's part of our software platform, we can extract the information directly from the SOC 2s, from your privacy policies, and we can correlate that data with what they're reporting in the assessment. So part of the verification process comes by using AI to correlate data in SOC 2s and other evidentiary documents with what's in your assessment. Really interesting and positive deployment of AI, and again, in a safe, closed loop environment. So next we want to talk about kind of the third leg of the stool, which is continuous monitoring. And here we want to emphasize, it's not risk scoring, it's true continuous monitoring. And Derrick, talk about why this is an important component of best practices in
attack surface. Yeah, the attack surface is very important. So how many of us really truly know what the risks are, leaving our organizations? You can only imagine. We have a lot of web servers and applications. We have remote work, remote access into your environment. So how do you truly know where the risks and vulnerabilities are? And that's talking about your own organization, but what about those third parties? Do you truly know? Do they truly know? And again, understanding where the blind spots are and the weaknesses are. Understanding that threat landscape is very critical to the success of your third-party risk management program.
That's right. And again, an integrated strategy is really important here. And we know you've walked around the floor, you've all been in business long enough. There are platforms out there. You can do your one-time assessments. Then there are risk scoring companies out there. Again, I emphasize risk scoring versus continuous monitoring. I don't want to go into those specific enterprises, but if they're buying batch data and deploying batch data, by the time they go through that process, it's already stale too. And the issue you have if those are separated and not integrated, if you're running one platform to do your assessments, one platform to do your continuous monitoring, someone still has to marry those results. If you have an integrated approach, it again provides one more point of verification. So now, if you're continuous monitoring, which is truly continuous, ask that question when you're demoing products all the time. Where are they getting their data? Are they buying batch data? Are they sourcing their own data? Where is that coming from? It's a critical question. And is it integrated with the software platform? Because when you have an integrated process, if it includes the AI applications and includes continuous monitoring, that's where you get actual verification, right? You send out your assessment, you get the attestation back, that's step one. You deploy the AI that's built into the software platform, or you source it elsewhere, but closed loop AI, you use that to really sift through the attachments and the evidentiary documents included with your assessment. That AI can then be extracted, and as I mentioned, can be correlated against those assessments so that the information you're getting in the assessment is not inconsistent with what's being reported in the SOC 2s. Then, if the continuous monitoring is embedded as part of it and integrated, you can look at those attack surfaces in real time. Why this integration is important: if you have risk scoring software and an assessment software, you don't get the benefit of the integration, because if it's integrated, someone could answer an assessment question, do you have any databases exposed to the internet? They say no, they attest to it. If your continuous monitoring is integrated, when they answer that question, it can pop up and say, actually, we see 3 databases exposed to the internet. If they say, we attest we don't have any software, any expired software licenses, we can say, well, that pops up immediately and says, actually, yes, you do. And by the way, you're running TLS 1.0. That's deprecated software, and everybody knows it's a known risk. You can't do that. I don't have to compare my risk scoring that gives me my threat intelligence with what's in my assessment, because it's done automatically and it's integrated. So it's part of a comprehensive program.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I think
Yeah.
the key word on this slide is real time, right? I think this is everything that Mike highlighted is real time. When that database pops up, so at that point in time, when you did the assessment, the database may not have been exposed. 2 days later, the technology is going to let you know that the database is exposed, right? So real time is very important. And I have a lot of real use cases that I see that firsthand in my organization as we're monitoring third parties. That's why technology is so important to continue to evolve with the threat landscape.
Let's talk about Change Healthcare, because obviously it's been big on everybody's mind, right? It's a really interesting case, because with some of the companies we work with the continuous monitoring, there were red flags. Red flags are there, and if you look at it, you can at least present that risk to the decision makers. They can then either decide whether to assume that risk as part of their business practices, because that function is so critical that they can't afford not to, but at least they're aware of the risk. And if you give them those risks that appear continuously, instantly, by looking at their threat vectors that are exposed to the internet, you can at least work with that vendor and say, hey, here's what we see. Can we talk about a strategy to get that improved as quickly as possible? And hopefully they do. Most of the time, their hearts are in the right place, and you give them that information and they want to make those changes to be secure. Every once in a while, you see someone who's recalcitrant and defensive, and it's unfortunate, but that's really what gives rise to breaches like the one that we've seen.
If I can summarize what you just said, is that being proactive rather than being reactive?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Very much so.
Yeah, the right technology can give you the ability to see and predict a potential incident if the right technology is leveraged by the organization.
So let's get to the stunning conclusion, which is, what are best practices in this space? What needs to happen? And thankfully, we have an example of best practices right to my left. So maybe you can talk to us about what Orlando Health does and why at least we consider this to be best practice in the industry.
Absolutely. So let's walk through this real quick. And I'm not going to go detail by detail, but what this indicates is the full life cycle. One of my favorite sayings in the organization is, I don't just wake up and try to figure things out, right? I really operate within frameworks. I use industry best practices and leveraging a framework such as this to kind of help guide the life cycle of a third-party risk management program. Again, the attack surface is correlated, the assessment response, multi-layer trust verification, real-time threat detection. All that's really saying is from start to end, we have a process for onboarding third-party vendors. And I'm not going to downplay the 50 questionnaire. What I'm going to say is, let's leverage technology to help the vendor complete the questionnaire. Let's take some of the workload of our team members to assess and evaluate the answers from that questionnaire and let the technology do the work and give me the summary, right? That's where the AI comes into play and some of those other things, right? There's an intake process. Working with if you have a great organization, you know that supply chain own all vendors, third-party vendors, right? And if you have a really good intake process, working with your supply chain, intaking the documentations, working with those third parties, and then you can understand how to manipulate and work with them. Once we do that, and it goes to our what we call our governance, risk, and compliance team, and some organizations have one, some don't, but it doesn't matter. We lean on technology to help us out there to take that data, assess that data, and then we can work directly with the third party to try to mitigate some of the risk before we introduce that technology into the environment. And again, correlating all of those actions, corrective actions to give the vendor an opportunity to say, those two exposed databases that we see, they can remediate that, and then we can move forward in the process. And now when you see the dotted line here, once we generate that full report, we present it to the business. Now the business has an understanding, here's a level of risk. Do we want to accept that risk? And we can choose not to accept that risk. And once we decide to accept that risk, now we can move to the post-onboarding life cycle. And that's where we get into the continuous monitoring, periodic risk assessments. You know, in the best world, and I'm going to conclude here in a second, but in an ideal world, we want to do continuous assessments, right? We prioritize our vendors based on their tiering structure. And the most important vendors, you want to assess them annually. And we all know that can be time consuming. Some of us have thousands of vendors and you can't do that. Again, you lean on technology to help you perform those scans, give you the highlight summaries, and you can prioritize who you need to go and do a reassessment on. But periodic risk assessments, that's that continuous monitoring that the technology can give you if you have a really well-defined process. And then the personnel and the shortage won't be as important if you really can leverage the technology and have a really well-defined process.
And that's what we consider to be the holy grail, and what we've tried to develop is a way to actually verify the security of your vendor network. And we think by the applications of AI, by integrating continuous monitoring and the automated assessment in one tool, we think we're getting very close to providing true verification of the security of your vendor networks as opposed to just relying on attestation. So again, the goal, instant verification and lasting security.
Oh.
So, a couple minutes, we got questions. If anyone has anyone wants to throw anything out at us, best practices here, Derrick. Anyone else? Anyone?
No questions?
Great.
So we all have
we're right over there too if anyone would like to talk to us afterwards, if you're too shy to grab a microphone. But
yeah.
Last chance, anything? Wait.
Robbie.
Derrick, a lot of choices back here in looking for vendors. How did you guys go through the selection process? What was important to you as you guys were trying to find a technology partner?
No, that's a great question. So as you can imagine, we have technology already in the organization, and we have a thorough vetting process through the supply channel, if you will. But what was important to myself and my team was really real-time monitoring. Again, I can go start with the Target breach was the first widely known breach that everyone was familiar with. And then the list just went on and on from there, right? And I think for me, it was really the real-time, continuous monitoring. And I compare, when I did what I call a proof of concept with the technology ProcessBolt, we did a real-time comparison. And we were receiving alerts and vulnerabilities and insights to all of our third parties that were true, that their competitors just didn't give me that visibility. Sometimes 2 and 3 weeks later, I would recognize that a vendor suffered a breach. You know, so that real-time monitoring was very important to me. In addition to that, there are some little nuances within the technology itself that helps us make a decision. Again, that framework that we outlined there from the inception all the way through the life cycle, we just went through line by line. We compared to existing technologies that, the process that exists. My teams understand the gaps that existed, and ProcessBolt was able to help us fill a lot of those gaps.
Okay, thanks.
Hopefully that answers your question, Robbie. Okay.
All right, well, once again, thank you very much. We really appreciate your attention, and we'd love to talk to any more of you if you have any other questions after.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.